In at number 5 we have the Franklin Castle in Ohio. The high Victorian home has been a fixture of the city's west side for over 100 years. It was built in the 1880s by grocer turned banker Hans Tiedemann. Although his wealth was significant, Tiedemann's life was filled with tragedy. A distressing number of his immediate family members would die in this house. The story goes that the construction of the castle's elaborate turrets, prominent gargoyles, and increasingly large network of rooms were an attempt to distract his wife from the ceaseless amount of death. That is, until she too suddenly passed away. After Tiedemann sold the property, it spent several decades as a German cultural center. The tales of hauntings picked up in the 1960s, as reports of surging electricity, the sound of babies crying, and a mysterious woman in black gained steam. Human bones were found in a closet in 1975. It was never confirmed who the remains belonged to, but with the number of deaths within the home, it is believed to be one of the Tiedemann's family. As the years have gone by, tales of Franklin Castle have grown, and now include an axe murder, a mass shooting of in the basement, and the alleged hanging death of Tiedemann's illegitimate daughter. Many stories focus on heinous acts that supposedly took place in tunnels below the house. After a fire, the home laid abandoned for several years before the current owners purchased the place in 2011. In at number 4 we have the Sallie house in Kansas. If you're into ghost hunting shows, you probably already know this famous haunted house. The unassuming home in Kansas is rumored to be the dark lair for a demon who takes on the form of a little girl because of a family's bizarre experiences there. Built in the mid-1800s in the growing community of Atchison, 2nd Street has seen its fair share of owners through the years, including the family of a 6-year-old girl named Sallie, who died in the home during a botched appendicitis surgery. It wasn't until the mid-1990s when Sallie's story first gained both local and national attention, when then owners Tony and Deborah Pickman lived in the home and began noticing strange occurrences, including attacks on Tony, unexplained voices, and apparent burnt finger marks upon mysteriously burning candles. Sallie isn't some harmless ghost. Theories around her malevolent presence in the house, as well as some evidence of satanic rituals in the basement, suggest that Sallie is in fact a demon disguised as a young girl. It is believed that the family was desperate in their grief and decided to perform the ritual in an attempt to bring back their daughter. Instead, they invited a demon into the home and offered them her body as a vessel. Since then, the demon has terrorized the home. Paranormal investigators have confirmed the house is haunted, but none have so far been able to cast out the demon. The Sallie house is open to the public if this sounds like the holiday location for you. In at number 3 we have Bell Witch Farm in Tennessee. In the early 1800s, John Bell bought a tract of farmland along Tennessee's Red River. Bell and his family thrived on the farm until they started to see strange looking animals around the property, most notably a dog with a rabbit's head. From that point on, the family was beset upon by unseen forces, largely targeted at Bell and his daughter Betsy. They experienced physical attacks, heard unexplained noises, and even spoke with the entity. What was the Bell Witch? Like most supernatural stories, certain details vary from version to version, but the prevailing account is that the Bell Witch claimed to be the spirit of Kate Batts, a mean old neighbor of John Bell who believed she was cheated by him in a land purchase. On her deathbed, she swore that she would haunt John Bell and his descendants. The human interactions with the spirits date all the way back to 1817. Former President Andrew Jackson was quoted as saying, "I had rather face the entire British army than to spend another night with the Bell Witch," after he and some of his troops spent a night at the Bell's farm. Over time, so many people traveled great distances to visit the Bell's home that it had to eventually be torn down for safety purposes in the latter part of the 1800s. The historic Bell Witch Cave has preserved some of the artifacts from the original cabin, such as a chimney stone and an iron kettle. You can see these articles along with some other artifacts, news articles and photos from the time John Bell and his family resided on the farm when touring the reconstructed Bell cabin. If you're interested in paranormal activity, or if you're a history buff, then the Bell Witch Cave and farm will definitely not disappoint. In at number 2 we have Villisca Axe Murder House in Villisca. The small Iowa town of Villisca doesn't have much to offer tourists except for a night of terror at the Villisca Axe Murder House. Back in 1912, the whitewood framed house was the site of a horrifying crime that left an entire family dead by axe. Shortly after midnight on June 10, 1912, a stranger hefting an axe lifted the latch on the back door of a 2-story timber house in the little Iowa town of Villisca. The door was not locked. Crime was not something you worried about in a modestly prosperous Midwest settlement of no more than 2,000 some people. The visitor was able to slip inside silently and close the door behind him. Still carrying the axe, the stranger walked past one room in which 2 girls lay sleeping and slipped up the narrow wooden stairs that led to 2 other bedrooms. He ignored one in which 4 more children were sleeping. He crept into the room in which 43-year-old Joe Moore lay next to his wife Sarah, raising the axe high above his head so high it gouged the ceiling. The man brought the flat of the blade down onto Joe. Then he struck Sarah before she had time to wake or register his presence. Leaving the couple, the killer went next door and used the axe on the other residents in the room. Once again, there is no evidence that they woke before they died, nor did the assailant or any of the other people in the home make sufficient noise to disturb Catherine's 2 friends, Lena and Ines Dillinger, as they slept downstairs. The killer then descended the stairs and took the lives of the Dillinger girls. What happened next marked the Villisca killings as truly peculiar and still sends shivers down the spine a century after the fact. The axeman went back upstairs and beheaded everyone in the home, leaving the faces of all 6 members of the family unrecognizable. The Moores were not discovered until several hours later. When neighbors didn't see the family wake in the morning, they called for Villisca's marshal, Hank Horton. That set in train a sequence of events that destroyed what little hope there may have been of gathering useful evidence from the crime scene. When a shaken doctor emerged, he cautioned members of the growing crowd outside, "Don't go in there, boys, you'll regret it until the last day of your life." Many ignored the advice. As many as 100 curious neighbors and townspeople tramped as they flew through the house scattering fingerprints. It is probably due to this damage to the crime scene along with the lack of knowledge on such large crimes that the killer was never found. It could have been one of the noisy neighbors or someone passing through time, but no one will ever know. What we do know is that there have been sightings of the family's spirits since, and the house continues to be a main attraction for dark tourism. And finally, in at number 1, we have House of Danger in New York. New York's Greenwich Village has some of the most desirable real estate in the world, except for this house on West 10th Street, known as the House of Danger. The townhouse is said to be haunted by the ghosts of 22 people who lived or died within its walls, including the tragic story of a girl who was killed by her adopted father. Being New York City, however, the house has a celebrity pedigree too. Said that author Mark Twain stayed in the house back in 1900 and returned for the occasional visit. The house seems to have started earning its reputation gradually after the Bourden family stopped living there. The first recorded incident of bad luck happened in 1897. Cycling celebrity Fred Andrew, the new owner and occupier of 14 West 10th Street, had a moment of bad luck. During his residency, as described in the New York Times, of August 9, 1897, Andrew had a moment of reckless bicycle riding that caused him to hit a person. The person suffered a broken leg and Andrew was subsequently arrested. Jan Bryant Bartle and her daughter took up residency of a spacious apartment on the top floor in 1957. Bartle reported almost immediately that a monstrous moving shadow would often follow her around the home. One time she writes that she had seen a ghostly figure of a man standing in a hall. Bravely, she reached out and tried to touch whatever she was seeing. She felt something, but nothing like she had felt before. She described it as a substance without substance, chilly and damp. Bartle was a true believer and took the proactive step of employing a paranormal expert to investigate what could be causing these terrifying realities for the scared residents. The investigator confirmed what the couple had believed from the start. The investigator said that they were upward of 22 spirits at the House of Danger. Besides Mark Twain, he mentioned additionally a woman in a white dress, a young girl, and a grey cat. On November 2nd, 1987, New York City witnessed a genuine tragedy at the House of Danger. The passing of Lisa Nussbaum was so horrific it caught everyone's attention. Around 6:40 a.m., 911 operators got a pressing phone call from children's author and editor Hedda Nussbaum. She said that her daughter Lisa wasn't breathing, so an ambulance was sent to Greenwich residents right away. When the paramedics arrived, they were greeted by a very disturbing scene. They found Lisa unresponsive on the kitchen floor and her brother Mitchell tied up in the home. Paramedics were regrettably unable to revive Lisa on their way to the hospital. Later, her autopsy revealed the cause of death was repeated blunt force trauma. Hedda and Joel were both arrested and subsequently charged with first-degree murder. Currently in private ownership, the building is resided in today and continues to add stories of hauntings to the legends of paranormal activity in the House of Death. The stairwell continues to be the nexus of the ghostly activity in the building. The dark and wide antique stairs are where many of the ghosts still make their appearances. Coming in at number 5, we have the Lizzie Bourden house in Massachusetts. Lizzie Bourden was an American woman who became the center of a sensational trial in the United States. In 1892, she was accused of killing her father and stepmother. Her family was well off and lived in the town of Fall River in Massachusetts. Her father had remarried 3 years after Lizzie's mother had died. Lizzie also had an older sister, Emma. They often argued with their father regarding their finances and their stepmother. Lizzie was well liked in the community and spent her days involved with various charity work. Her father was not well liked though. He was known to be stubborn and cruel. On the morning of August 4th, 1892, Mr. Bourden left his home for work. Left in the house was Lizzie, the stepmother, and a live-in maid. Her sister was out of town at the time. When he returned from work, it was reported that he sat down in the living room and had a nap. No one knows exactly what happened to Mr. and Mrs. Bourden next, but Lizzie gave her version of events. Lizzie claims to have returned home at around 11:15. Upon her return, she found her father brutally attacked on the sofa. Upstairs, his wife's body was found mutilated. It was later confirmed she had died around an hour before her husband. There was little evidence to what had actually happened to the Bourdens. Lizzie had suspicious activity that made it seem likely that she was involved. On August 3rd, Lizzie had purchased some poisonous acid. It was also found that she had burned some of her clothing on the stove, and in the days following the murder, the maid was also suspected of the killing. She was seen leaving the home carrying an unexamined parcel in the evening following the murder. No weapon was ever found, though they did suspect the axe that was found in the basement. Lizzie was arrested and tried but was acquitted due to the lack of evidence. It was widely believed she was guilty. She was shunned by her community. She would stay in the family home until she died of old age in 1927. The house is reportedly haunted by both Lizzie's spirit and Mr. and Mrs. Bourden. Coming in at number 4, we have Merchant House Museum in New York. The Merchant House is the only 19th century family home that has been preserved. The house was built in 1832 by a wealthy merchant. The merchant Seabury Treadwell raised his family in the home. He had 8 children. The home was never empty as the family constantly grew, with 4 servants, nieces, nephews, cousins, and aunts all staying at the home from time to time. Most of the family lived there until their old age. The youngest daughter, Gertrude, lived there alone for 24 years after the death of her older sister. She was eccentric and became obsessed with holding on to the family home in its original state. The neighborhood around her home was run down. Many of the homes around it were demolished. As you can see today, the home stands alone in its elegance. After she died in 1933, a distant cousin purchased the house to ensure it was not demolished. He turned the home into a museum, a time capsule of what it was like to live in the 19th century. Still has the original possessions from the family. Not everything in the home was idyllic. There are some ghosts that linger in the home, other than those of the family members who refused to leave even in death. There is a famous story, the thief who tried to steal from the family. It was said he broke in one night while the family slept. He stole a lot of jewels and valuables from the home. He was attempting to make his escape through a hole he had made in one of the weaker walls. As he squeezed through the hole, the wall collapsed on top of him. He did not survive. He was found by the family in the morning. The thief's brother apparently demanded justice. He claimed that the wall should not have been made so poorly. It was the bad quality of the wall that killed his brother. Obviously, this was not seen as a valid concern. The thief's ghost is reported to still be lingering in the home. Luckily, the house is now a museum and not a hotel, so you shouldn't have too much trouble with the ghosts. There have been various sightings. Someone saw one of the daughters sat in the garden. As they walked towards the girls, she disappeared. A man covered in a dust like soot had been seen around the kitchen, believed to be the thief. Many guests feel cold spots around the house. At least the majority of the ghosts are friendly. The Treadwell family are just enjoying their beloved home. Coming in at number 3, we have Villa de Vecchi in Italy. The Villa de Vecchi in Italy was built around 1854. It has the nickname the House of Witches. The house was riddled with tragedies from day one. Count Felix de Vecchi was head of the Italian National Guard. He was considered a decorated hero. He wanted to build a dream home for him and his family. He recruited architect Alessandro Sedoli. It took around 3 years to build the home. Alessandro died a year before the villa was completed. This would come to be seen as the first bad omen. Of course, at the time, it was simply an unfortunate event. Once finished, the home was a great mansion. It was outfitted with all the modern conveniences of the time, including indoor heating. No expense was spared. The home had extensive gardens and promenades. Unfortunately, the family would not be able to enjoy their lives in the idyllic home. Sometime in 1862, the Count returned home from a day's work. He found his wife had been brutally attacked. It was too late to save her. More than that, his daughter had been taken. He had started a lengthy search for his daughter, using his best men to search as far as they were able. The daughter was never found. Later that same year, the staff found the Count in his study. He had taken his own life from the guilt of losing his family. The villa was passed from owner to owner for a few years. By the year 1960, the home would be left permanently uninhabited. The house fell into ruin. The walls have fallen and vandals have destroyed much of the interior. There are now rumors that occultists use the home for rituals. The home is said to be strongly connected to spirits and ghosts. Many entities have been spotted here. If you were to visit the home, you'd be able to sense those who have passed, along with the other spirits who have been called on by rituals. Coming in at number 2, we have Los Feliz Mansion in Los Angeles. Very little is known about the Los Feliz Mansion before it was bought by cardiologist Harold Perelson for his family. family. The family seemed to live there happily until 1959. Harold lived in the home with his wife and 3 children, the oldest named Judy. It was reported that Perelson was in a financial crisis. He had sunk thousands into a medical device he had invented only to have it stolen by a colleague. Things went from bad to tragic for the family on December 6, 1959. It's reported that Harold lost his mind. He woke at around 4:30 a.m. He took a hammer to his wife. He then went to his daughter's room. He tried to do the same thing to Judy, but failed. She managed to escape screaming. She ran to the neighbors where she could call the police. The 2 younger children woke up during the screaming. Harold told them to go back to sleep and that they were having a nightmare. Harold then went back to his study. He took 2 doses of something and 31 pills before lying down. He had passed by the time the police and ambulance arrived on the scene. The house has sat untouched since this happened. The house was purchased by a family, but they chose to leave everything in the house as they found it. They never spent a single night in the home, but came and went with storage. It is rumored that if you go to visit the house, you can still see the Christmas tree in the living room, surrounded by the presents neatly wrapped, as well as a Life magazine on the coffee table along with other signs of the time. And finally, in at number 1 we have Louis Family Mansion in Taiwan. The Louis Family Mansion, or more commonly known as Mingsong Ghost House, is one of the most haunted locations in Taiwan. The house, built in 1929, is situated in the countryside near Chiayi. The home was once a beautiful 3-story, perfect for any family. Looking at the home today, you can see the old charm, but the house is overgrown and a tapestry of trees that have claimed it over time. Louis Rongyu, an affluent merchant and landowner, bought the house for his family. It was rumored that he had started an affair with the maid. This affair went on for years without anyone knowing anything of it. Finally, the maid got tired of being a secret and confronted his wife. Louis Rongyu broke off the affair, choosing his family. The maid was reportedly distraught about what had happened. She jumped from the 2nd-story balcony into the well below. Some say another family member might have pushed her to save them the public embarrassment. After this, the ghost of the maid haunted the family every night, terrorizing them. She would not let them rest. It was not long before the family felt they had to move out, leaving their home behind. They never sold the property, it was simply left to rot. Perhaps they did not want anyone else to be terrorized by the angry spirit they had created. Dark tourists continue to visit the house. There have been various sightings of the ghost since then. People are warned not to spend the night, as this is when she looks for vengeance. Would you risk it? I certainly wouldn't. In at number 5 we have Mudhouse Mansion. The Mudhouse Mansion is believed to have been built sometime between 1840 and 1850. There is a lot of mystery around the home and the different tales of what has happened here. In 1892 a man bought the home for him, his wife and their 3 children. Once they moved into the home, the neighbors did not see them. They wanted to wait for them to settle in before going to introduce themselves. After a few weeks passed and they still didn't see the family, one neighbor went in to investigate the home. She saw a woman dressed in white at the 2nd floor window. She did not move, she just stared at her. She went back the next day to see if there had been any change. She saw the woman again in the same place. She repeatedly checked in on the home, but on the 10th day she called the police as the figure did not move in any of the time that had passed. The police broke down the door to investigate. They found each family member dressed in white hanging from the staircase. The figure that she had seen all of those times was the wife hanging in front of the window. They had been hanging there for several weeks. There is folklore that the house is the original location of the witch Bloody Mary. They say the land is cursed and anyone who lives there will perish. The house remained empty for the rest of its years. It attracted ghost hunters. One woman claimed that she was on the 2nd floor when she heard a loud group of people on the 3rd floor. When she went to ask them what was happening, she found she was alone in the home. The voices stopped and no one was on the 3rd floor. The house was demolished in 2015 due to growing fears from the surrounding area. The home had been empty since the 1930s due to fear of what had happened here. If the folklore is true, any home built on the land will also carry the curse. In at number 4, S.K. Pierce Mansion. Sylvester Pierce was a wealthy businessman from Massachusetts. He started his business S.K. Pierce & Sons Furniture Company. The company was extremely successful for the family. In the late 1880s, Pierce decided he should build a mansion befitting his fortune. The mansion he built was a marvel for its time. The home was 7,000 square feet with 10 bedrooms. It took 16 months and 100 men to build this home. The family moved in swiftly as the grand home was completed, but their celebrations didn't last long when his wife Susan fell down the staircase a few weeks after moving in. She sustained many injuries but did not die from the fall. She did die from a bacterial illness she got in one of her wounds. After After a year of mourning, Pierce remarried Ellen. This was widely talked about as she was 30 years younger than him. Pierce passed away in 1888, leaving behind his new wife and the 2 sons they had together and his son from the previous marriage. When Ellen passed, the sons argued constantly over who would take the home and business. The Great Depression destroyed the business, leaving only the mansion to decide. Eventually it was given to the youngest son. The mansion went through hard times as the family lost the fortune. Edward decided to turn the mansion into a boarding home. The home was used for drinking, gambling, and other activities people wanted to do in secret. There were even a number of murders that occurred. One woman was strangled in one of the second-floor rooms by another boarder. A Finnish immigrant burned to death in the master bedroom in 1963. There is also another story of a young boy who drowned in the basement when he ran off from his family. Since these days, the house has been regarded as haunted. There is no shortage of people who has passed here. There are also claims a dark entity inhabits the basement and may have been the cause of the young boy wandering off. Guests have experienced voices talking to them as they sleep, furniture moving without anyone being in the room, as well as shadow people caught in the corner of guests' eyes. The house is now open for ghostly tours, but no one may stay the night as it is considered too dangerous. In at number 3, the Lemp Mansion in St. Louis, Missouri. The Lemp Mansion was built in 1890 in St. Louis. It was originally owned and built by William Lemp for his growing family. Lemp's father, Adam Lemp, was a German man who moved to the US in 1839. He became very successful when he opened a grocery and started to produce and sell authentic German lager. All things seemed to be going well for the Lemp family. Adam passed down his company to his son, William Sr. William went on to expand and grow the Western Brewery Company started by his father. He married his wife in 1861 and they moved into their new home in 1890. They had 4 children together, all boys who went on to work for the company. It was their youngest son, Frederick, who he had hoped to groom to inherit the entire company. In 1901, Frederick died due to heart failure from complications of his diseases. William Sr. became depressed from this. He lost his will to work. He slowly declined. His family's effort to console him did nothing to bring him back. In 1904, William Lemp took his own life by gunshot. With 2 tragedies in the family, they still kept going to try and recover from their losses, but there was still more to come from them. A few years later, his wife developed and passed from cancer, leaving the children, the home, and the company to run. William Jr. took over the company in his father's absence. He married and they had 1 son, William III. Jesus. A few years later, she filed for divorce. She won custody of their son. The company also took a hit during the Prohibition when they had to shut down. They had to sell their trademark and the brewery complex was sold at auction. William struggled to deal with all of his immense loss. He did not see a way to recover all he had lost. He took his life in the same room as William Sr. had all those years prior. The house is said to now be haunted by the Lemp family and all of their tragedies. In at number 2, we have Hotel Cecil in Los Angeles, California. Hotel Cecil, or Stay on Main in LA, is probably one of the most well-known haunted locations. While it's not a house, it is a home for many people as the building is not only a hotel but a residence. The hotel became the center of the Netflix documentary The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, which looked into the disappearance of Elisa Lam. The hotel opened in 1924. It was designed to be a high-end hotel for those traveling on business. The hotel quickly fell from the image they initially had. They advertised monthly and more permanent rates but now offer as short as hourly. Within the first 10 years of the hotel being open, many lost souls checked into the hotel, who were never planning to check out. The first incident occurred in 1927, 3 years after opening. Guest Percy Cook had taken his own life. His wife had left him, taking their child. 4 years later, a man was found in his room after ingesting poison. Within the following 3 years, 2 more people took their lives. This quickly gained the hotel a dark reputation. People seemed to be drawn to the hotel as their final resting place. From 1937, the passings became more violent. People's lives started being taken by others. It was said all of the tragedies had cursed the hotel. Since 1937, 14 more people have passed away at the hotel. It is even rumored that in the case of Elisa Lam, she may have experienced hauntings in the hotel before she disappeared. There was footage of her in a lift performing what is thought to be a ritual where you invite spirits to join you. This was the last anyone would ever see of her. She was later found in one of the water tanks on the roof. Could this have been connected to the ritual, or maybe she saw something else during her stay? And finally, in at number 1, we have Jean Harlow House, Los Angeles, California. When Jean Harlow was 18, she married Paul Bourden and moved into her famous Hollywood home. Jean was an actress famous for her roles in Double Whoopee and The Saturday Night Kid. She was seen as the latest blonde bombshell. Her personal life, however, would never be as successful as her acting career. Her marriage to Paul was her second. She married for the first time when she was only 16 years old. Her marriage to Paul was surprising to the public. He was 22 years older than her and not considered considered to be attractive. Their marriage only lasted 2 months before ending in tragedy. Paul Bourden had been married previously to Dorothy Millett. Paul hadn't spoken of Dorothy for years. His secrets finally caught up to him when he was found by his butlers deceased in his bedroom. He had a bullet wound through his head and a letter left next to him explaining why he ended his life. Authorities recovered the note and ruled the death by his own hands, but the staff pointed the fingers to Dorothy. She had visited him a day earlier. Jean had no knowledge of this. The police went to interrogate Dorothy only to find she had jumped from her hotel balcony. Jean sold and left the home after the incident. 5 years later, in 1937, Jean was on set filming Saratoga. She was found in her dressing room passed out on the floor. She had suffered from kidney failure and died at the age of 26. In 1983, a hairstylist named J.C. Bring bought the former home. At the time, he was with Sharon Tate. Tate often stayed in the home. As most of us know, Sharon Tate also met an horrific end. She was a victim to Charles Manson while pregnant in 1969. Many people believe the house is cursed. Before her passing, Sharon Tate was questioned about the home. She was questioned in an interview about the suspected hauntings. She did experience some paranormal activity during her time there. She told them that she saw a ghostly man in her bedroom. She believed it to be Paul Bourden. She saw a second figure tied to the staircase. She said the second figure had a slit on their throat. She said it almost looked like her. Tate called it a premonition. Could Bourden have been trying to warn her? Either way, we know that the home houses the spirits of those who passed there.